The church was silent. So silent that even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. A folded American flag rested on top of the polished oak casket, its edges catching the soft morning light that filtered through the stained glass windows. Officers in full dress uniforms stood shoulder to shoulder, forming a line of honor for the man they all respected, retired Sergeant Mark Holloway. But just as the chaplain lifted his hand to begin the final prayer, a low growl cut through the stillness. It came from Rex, the canine who had served beside Mark for nearly 8 years. The dog's ears snapped forward, body rigid, tail stiff. His handler tried to steady him, whispering his name, but Rex's chest rose and fell in fast waves. Something inside him had shifted. A heartbeat later, Rex lunged. His paws slammed against the floor as he dragged 2 officers toward the casket, barking with an intensity that made the pews vibrate. People gasped. Some stumbled back. Others froze, staring in disbelief as the usually disciplined canine snarled at the very place his partner was supposed to be resting. "Get him under control!" someone shouted. But then, something else happened. The corner of the casket's silk lining moved. Just a tremor, barely visible. Yet Rex saw it. And in that instant, the funeral became something entirely different. Because the dog wasn't mourning. He was warning. Long before the tension of that morning, the town of Riverside, Colorado, had always spoken of Mark Holloway with a kind of quiet admiration. He wasn't the loudest man on the force, nor the most decorated. But he was steady, solid as the red mountains that framed their little valley. The kind of officer who remembered birthdays, who helped elderly shop owners fix broken lights, who stayed late after every parade just to direct traffic until the last family drove home safely. When Mark retired 2 years earlier, the whole town gathered for his farewell. They gave speeches, shared jokes, and showed a slideshow of his years on the force. But the loudest applause wasn't for Mark. It was for Rex. The German Shepherd had been his partner, shadow, and protector. Together, they had tracked fugitives through snowstorms, located missing hikers, and once saved a teenager trapped in a drainage tunnel during a flash flood. People swore Rex understood English better than most humans. When Mark retired, he insisted Rex retire with him. "They've worked together this long," the chief said. "They've earned the right to rest together." And rest they did. Mark and Rex spent their mornings walking along the South Platte River, where Rex would chase drifting leaves while Mark photographed the sunrise with an old film camera. In the afternoons, Mark volunteered at the local high school, teaching students about public safety, while Rex lay under the desk, keeping one eye half open as if guarding the whole room. Yet beneath the warmth of their quiet routines, something else lingered, something only a few officers noticed. During his final months, Mark had become different, more withdrawn, less quick to smile. His wife, Elaine, said he sometimes woke in the night, gasping, clutching his chest, even though doctors said his heart was fine. And Rex sensed it all. The dog had begun sleeping closer to Mark's bedside, never relaxing fully, always listening. When Mark sat on the porch staring into the distance, Rex would gently rest his head on Mark's knee, as if trying to anchor him back to the world. So when the news came, sudden, shocking, that Mark had passed away quietly in his sleep, the whole town grieved. Officers lowered flags. Students left flowers on the Holloway family porch. And Rex simply lay beside Mark's empty chair, unmoving, as if waiting for footsteps that would never return. Or so everyone believed, because even then, Rex sensed something no one else did. The morning of the funeral arrived wrapped in a pale gray sky. As if even the weather hesitated to brighten the day, Riverside had to say goodbye to one of its quiet heroes. Officers began gathering outside St. Thomas Matthew's Chapel, hours before the service, adjusting their uniforms, straightening their badges, exchanging brief, solemn nods. But amid the hush, One presence drew nearly every eye. Rex. He stood beside Officer Jenna Hartley, the young handler temporarily assigned to him. Rex's fur bristled along his spine as he scanned the crowd, his eyes sharp, restless, almost hunted. Jenna tried to soothe him with a slow stroke down his neck, but the dog barely reacted. He kept pulling forward, trying to return to the hearse where Mark's casket lay waiting. "It's okay, boy," Jenna whispered. He's gone." But Rex's ears flattened at those words. His nostrils flared as he inhaled the air around the hearse. Long, deep, deliberate breaths. Jenna assumed he was grieving, refusing to leave the man who had been his world. Still, something about the dog's posture made her uneasy. Inside the chapel, as the flag-draped casket was carried to the front, Rex stiffened again, his head lowered, tail raised, body leaning forward on controlled, precise steps, the unmistakable stance of a trained canine detecting something off. Jenna tightened her grip on the leash. "Easy, Rex, easy." But the dog wasn't listening. His gaze locked onto the side panel of the casket. He pulled forward, sniffing intensely at the lower left corner. His breathing changed. Short, rapid bursts Mark had once described as Rex sorting smells, distinguishing layers of scent the way a musician hears notes in a symphony. And what Rex smelled wasn't death. It was something else. Something alive, something familiar, yet wrong. When the pallbearers set the casket onto the wooden stand, Rex took several steps backward, hackles rising again. A low vibration hummed inside his throat, the kind of growl meant not for warning strangers, but for alerting handlers. Jenna crouched beside him. "Are you picking up something?" Rex didn't blink. His eyes stayed fixed on the casket. Across the aisle, Chief Daniels noticed. His brows furrowed, concern flickering for just a second. He had worked with K9 units for 20 years. He could read a dog's body language almost as well as any handler. And what he saw in Rex wasn't grief, it was fear. That realization unsettled him more than he cared to admit. Rex stepped closer again, nose pressed to the edge of the polished wood. His muscles trembled. His tail froze. He let out a whine, soft, thin, desperate. Then he backed away, refusing to sit, refusing to turn his eyes from the casket. To everyone else, it looked like an animal unable to accept loss. But to the trained officers in the room, a deeper question began whispering in the air. What did Rex smell that no one else could see? The organ music began, soft, low, the kind that settles over a room like a blanket of sorrow. People rose from their seats as the chaplain walked slowly toward the podium, his voice steady as he welcomed everyone to the memorial of Sergeant Mark Holloway. But Rex wasn't listening. His ears twitched at every shift of fabric, every shuffle of shoes, every breath that echoed too loudly in the chapel. His body stayed taut, a coiled spring waiting for release. Jenna held his leash firmly, but even she could feel the tremors traveling through the dog's muscles. Then it happened. A subtle tap sounded from the direction of the casket, so faint most people wouldn't have distinguished it from wooden panels settling. But Rex heard it. His entire body lurched forward, nails scraping the floor. "Rex!" Jenna whispered, tightening her grip. But the dog's reaction rippled across the room like an invisible shockwave. Several officers looked up. A few exchanged glances. Chief Daniels shifted his weight, eyes narrowing. The chaplain continued speaking, unaware. Rex let out a sharp, clipped bark, so sudden and so loud that several mourners gasped. Jenna hissed, "No, Rex, heel!" But the command barely slowed him. He strained toward the casket again, pulling with a strength that forced Jenna to plant her feet. Across the front row, Elaine Holloway, Mark's widow, pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Her eyes filled, not from grief this time, but something like dread. "Rex doesn't bark at Mark," she whispered to her sister. Never. Not once. Her sister placed an arm around her. Honey, dogs get confused when they're sad. But Elaine shook her head. Not Rex. Not him. Up near the podium, the chaplain paused, unsettled. If someone could please calm the K9. Jenna flushed, embarrassed but uneasy. She knelt, gripping Rex's collar, trying to get him to focus on her. But his eyes, dark, sharp, unblinking, never left the casket. And then another sound. A faint, stuttering click, barely audible, barely noticeable. Except to Rex. He exploded upward, barking with a force that shook the chapel rafters. He lunged so hard that Jenna lost her balance and stumbled forward. 2 officers rushed to restrain him, grabbing the leash as Rex fought with pure instinct. A murmur swept through the crowd. What's wrong with him? Is he smelling something? He never acted like this before. Chief Daniels raised a hand, signaling for calm. But his face had changed. The mask of composure was cracking. He recognized that bark. He had heard it only twice in his career, and both times it meant danger. Real danger. Daniels, one lieutenant whispered. Should we? Not yet, the chief replied, though hesitation edged his voice. Maybe it's just stress. But deep inside, the uneasy truth pressed against him. Rex wasn't confused. He wasn't grieving, and he wasn't reacting to death. He was reacting to life. Life coming from somewhere it absolutely should not be. The chaplain tried to continue, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. The entire chapel felt wrong now. Too quiet, too tense. Like everyone was waiting for something to break. Rex stood rigid between the 2 officers restraining him, chest heaving, saliva gathering at the corners of his mouth, not from aggression but from panic. His nose kept snapping toward the lower left panel of the casket. Every few seconds, he let out a muted growl, low and vibrating, a sound Jenna had never heard from him before. Chief Daniels stepped closer, his polished shoes echoing on the wooden floor. He leaned down subtly, examining the casket without drawing attention. From a distance, nothing seemed unusual. Smooth wood, perfect seams, the folded flag draped neatly on top. But then he saw it. A line, thin, fresh, barely visible. A hairline shift in the grain, like pressure from inside had nudged the wood outward. A chill crept up his spine. "Did anyone bump the casket?" Daniels whispered to the pallbearer beside him. "No, sir. It was steady the whole way." Daniels' jaw tightened. Behind them, Rex whined again and pressed forward, his front paw tapping rapidly against the floor. 1, 2, 3 taps. Jenna froze. Mark once told her that was Rex's emergency alert signal. The signal he used when he detected a breathing heat signature through walls. A living one. "Chief," Jenna whispered shakily, "that's his live fine behavior." Daniels didn't answer. His eyes remained locked on that almost imperceptible distortion in the wood. Another tiny tick sounded, sharp enough that 3 officers glanced up at the same time. The nearest mourner gasped and clutched her husband's arm. The chaplain slowly lowered his prayer book. "Perhaps," he said softly, "we should pause for a moment." But before anyone could respond, Rex snapped his head toward the casket again and barked with a raw, desperate force. So violent the sound cracked in the middle. He lunged, and all 3 officers restraining him had to brace their legs. "Something's in there," a young officer whispered. Everyone heard him. Everyone felt it. Silence spread through the chapel like a cold tide. Daniel's voice came out low, uncertain for the first time in his long career. "Is anyone else seeing that shift?" A faint tremor rolled through the casket, so small it could have been imagined. But Rex didn't imagine it. His entire body had already dropped into a protective crouch, teeth bared at the unseen threat, barking, not at loss, but at danger. Danger coming from inside the coffin of the man he refused to believe was gone. For a long moment, the chapel stood frozen, every breath held, every movement stilled. Only Rex moved, muscles quivering beneath his dark coat, as he stared at the casket like it was a living threat. His tail stood rigid, not wagging, not twitching, locked in the unmistakable posture of a canine signaling danger. Then the sound came again. Not a tap this time, not a faint tick, but a thud, soft, muffled. From inside the casket, a woman in the third pew gasped so loudly, her hand flew to her mouth. Someone else whispered, "Dear God." An elderly veteran crossed himself. Jenna felt her throat tighten. She looked at Chief Daniels, and for the first time since she had joined the force, she saw a flicker of fear in a man known for keeping calm, even under gunfire. "Tell me you heard that," she said, her voice barely audible. Daniels didn't answer at first. His eyes stayed locked on the casket, his breath trembling. Finally, he whispered, "I did." Rex tried to surge forward again, barking so ferociously the sound echoed off the stained glass windows. The officers holding him struggled to maintain their grip. "Should we open it?" a lieutenant asked, voice shaking. "Sir, if he's—" "We don't know what's happening yet," another interrupted quickly. "It could be something else." "What something else moves from the inside?" the lieutenant shot back. Tension exploded into murmurs across the room. Elaine Holloway stood suddenly, as if pulled upward by some invisible force. Her eyes were wide, shimmering with hope and terror. "Mark," she whispered. "Mark, are you in there?" Her voice cracked like breaking glass. Jenna's heart clenched. The chaplain placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. "Ma'am, we have to be cautious." But Rex barked again, snapping their attention back to the casket. His bark changed pitch, rising into the urgent alarm tone trained canines use for live human detection, a sound meant to cut through chaos and demand action. Chief Daniels drew in a long, steadying breath. His decision, whatever it was, would either save a life or unravel the most sacred moment of a police funeral. Then the casket shifted. Not imagined, not subtle. A clear, undeniable movement. A slight jolt, as if someone inside had twitched. Half the chapel screamed. Officers surged forward instinctively. Rex howled, a chilling, guttural cry filled with panic and conviction. Daniels lifted his hand, voice barely more than a whisper. "God help us." "Open that casket." The chapel erupted into movement the moment Chief Daniels gave the order. Officers hurried toward the casket, hands trembling despite their training. The air felt charged, thick, vibrating, alive with something between fear and impossible hope. But Rex moved first. The instant the officers loosened their grip, he lunged forward with a force that nearly yanked the leash from Jenna's hands. His claws scraped the wooden floor as he bolted straight to the casket, planting himself against it, chest pressed to the polished wood, as if shielding it, or warning everyone else away. "Rex! Back!" Jenna commanded. But Rex refused. Instead, he turned his head, locking eyes with her. An urgent, pleading stare she had never seen before. His body shook, not with aggression, but with desperation. "Let me try," Chief Daniels said, stepping forward. He approached Rex slowly, palms open. "Easy, boy. We're going to help him. We're here. But we need space." Rex let out a broken whine, torn between obeying and protecting. He stepped back only a few inches, just enough for two officers to move in. One officer unclipped the decorative brass latches. Another hesitated, hands hovering over the lid. Then, thump, clear, muffled, but undeniable. The sound hit the entire room like a shockwave. Several people cried out. One officer staggered back, hand over his mouth. Chief Daniels' voice dropped to a whisper. "That's breathing movement." Elaine collapsed to her knees, sobbing. Mark, please." The officer at the lid swallowed hard. "On three," Daniels nodded. "On three." But they never made it to one. Rex suddenly reared up on his hind legs, placing both front paws against the side of the casket, barking directly into it with frantic urgency. His paw struck the lid, once, twice, almost as if he were trying to answer the trapped person inside. The chaplain clutched his cross. One of the pallbearers whispered shakily, "This can't be real. This can't—" "Move!" Daniels barked. Officers surged in, gripping the lid. Rex jumped back, crouched low, tail stiff, body ready. The chapel fell dead silent. Every breath held, every heart pounding, every eye fixed on that impossible wooden box. Because deep down, everyone understood. Rex wasn't reacting to a memory. He wasn't reacting to grief. He was reacting to life, fighting its way back. Daniels exhaled shakily and braced himself. "Open it." The lid lifted only an inch at first, just enough for a thin line of air to escape. It carried a smell the nearest officers didn't expect. Not decay, not the sterile scent of embalming fluids, but something warm, human, alive. "Higher," Chief Daniels said, voice trembling despite himself. Two officers pushed. The hinges groaned. The lid rose halfway, and Elaine let out a sound between a sob and a gasp, because Mark Holloway's chest was moving, barely, shallow, but undeniably rising and falling. "He's breathing," the chaplain whispered, the words falling from his lips as if he couldn't believe them himself. The room erupted. Some shouted, some cried. Others stumbled backward, gripping pews for support. But Rex pushed forward again, nose pressed to the opening, whining with such fierce joy it shattered the tension like glass. "Get EMS in here now!" Daniels barked. But no one moved. They were all frozen, staring at the man they had mourned just moments ago. Mark's eyelids fluttered, a tiny, involuntary motion. His fingers twitched next, curling slightly against the white burial cloth. "Mark!" Elaine cried, reaching forward. Daniels gently blocked her. "Give him space! Let the medics get through!" Jenna ran to the door, yelling for paramedics. The moment she opened it, Rex barked 3 sharp times, the canine equivalent of an urgent signal. The medics rushed in, and then something even stranger happened. As they leaned in to assess Mark, one medic frowned. "He's warm, very warm. There's no rigor mortis, no cooling. This man isn't freshly deceased. He never went fully under." Another medic checked his eyes. Pulse is faint but present. Respiration shallow but rhythmic. "This looks like catalepsy." "Catalepsy?" an officer asked. "A neurological shutdown," the medic said quickly. "Breathing and heart rate drop so low they can be missed. We've seen it during opioid exposures, certain toxins, trauma." Jenna's eyes widened. "Toxins?" Chief Daniels' mind snapped into focus. Suddenly the pieces aligned. Mark's strange behavior in the months before his death. The investigation he never finished. The fear in his eyes no one understood. Rex barked again, this time deeper, more urgent. He sniffed along the blanket covering Mark, then sneezed sharply, as if reacting to an odor no one else could detect. The medic paused. "He's right. There's a chemical smell here. Something synthetic." Daniels felt his stomach twist. He looked down at Mark, alive yet hovering on the edge. And just like that, he knew. Someone hadn't meant for Mark to die. They meant for him to disappear. Rex, trembling with adrenaline, nudged Mark's unmoving hand. And Mark's finger moved, just slightly, toward him. Paramedics worked quickly, slipping an oxygen mask over Mark's face, checking vitals, murmuring numbers that sounded impossibly hopeful for a man who had just been declared dead. Officers formed a ring around the casket, as if protecting a crime scene, because that's what it was now. But Rex stayed closest. The dog pressed himself against the gurney as they prepared to lift Mark out of the casket, ears pinned back, breathing fast and shallow. His tail was tucked, not in fear, but in raw, overwhelming confusion and protectiveness. His eyes flicked between Mark's face and the officers around him, reading every movement, every shift. When the medic lifted the blanket to adjust the straps, a scent spilled into the air, sharp, chemical, metallic. Rex's reaction was immediate. He snapped his head toward the smell and growled, deep, resonant, the kind of growl he used when alerting to dangerous substances during narcotic sweeps. "What is that?" Jenna asked, sniffing the air but smelling nothing out of the ordinary. The medic shook his head. "Some kind of synthetic residue. Not typical for a body prepared for burial." One officer frowned. "Wait, wasn't Mark investigating a fentanyl manufacturing ring before he retired?" Daniels turned slowly. "Yes, but he closed that case." His tone said he didn't believe that anymore. Rex walked the length of the gurney, nose twitching, locking onto Mark's sleeve. He sniffed, then snarled. An unmistakable narcotics alert. "He's signaling!" Jenna cried. "He's alerting to residue on Mark." A heavy silence fell. The medic leaned closer, inspecting Mark's arm. "There's discoloration here, not from embalming. Almost like an injection site." Elaine let out a small cry. "Someone did this to him?" Daniels clenched his jaw. If Mark was exposed to a high dose of certain lab-made compounds, it could mimic death, slow everything down to a crawl. "And the dog recognized the scent," the medic said softly. "He knew something was wrong." Rex barked once, a sharp, decisive sound, as if confirming it. Daniels exhaled shakily. "Which means Mark didn't just fall asleep." He turned to the officers around him. He was silenced. Gasps spread through the room. Jenna knelt beside Rex. "How long have you known, boy?" Rex pressed his forehead against Mark's arm, whining softly. He had known since the moment the casket was brought home. The scent was wrong. The story was wrong. The stillness was wrong. Rex didn't understand betrayal. He didn't understand conspiracy. But he understood Mark. And what he smelled on his partner was not death. It was danger. The kind that still waited beyond those chapel doors. The medics pushed the gurney toward the chapel doors, calling for more equipment. What had been a funeral only minutes earlier had turned into a frantic rescue. Officers scrambled aside, unsure whether to clear a path or shield the scene. Elaine hurried behind them, hands clasped tightly, as though holding herself together. Rex refused to leave Mark's side. When one medic tried to guide him back, Rex bared his teeth, not in aggression, but in a trembling, panicked plea. Jenna stepped forward quickly. "Let him come," she said. "He's grounding Mark. He knows his breathing pattern." The medic hesitated only a second before nodding. "Fine, keep him close." Outside, the cold air hit them, the kind that feels sharp enough to wake even the deepest sleeper. Mark's chest rose slightly, more than before. A stuttering breath escaped him, faint but real. Elaine cried out, covering her mouth. "He's fighting!" Rex climbed onto the ambulance step and lowered his head onto Mark's arm. His body pressed against his partner's as though trying to share his warmth, his pulse, his life. "BP is climbing," a medic called. "He's responding." Jenna blinked hard, her throat tightening. "Good boy. Keep going, Rex." As the ambulance doors slammed shut, Rex let out a long, quivering howl, low, mournful, but carrying a fierce determination beneath it. The kind of sound that said he wasn't letting go. Not now. Not after 2 years of watching Mark fade under secrets he carried alone. Inside the ambulance, Mark's eyelids flickered. A medic leaned closer. "Sir? Mark? Can you hear me?" His fingers twitched again. Rex pressed his nose under Mark's hand, and for a heartbeat, Mark's fingers curled around the fur they knew so well. A whisper escaped his cracked lips. Fragile, barely more than breath. "Rex." The medics froze. Elaine burst into sobs. Jenna stared, unable to speak. Rex responded instantly, licking Mark's wrist, whining in soft, rhythmic pulses, the same pattern he used in training to guide lost civilians toward consciousness. And Mark, against every medical expectation, took a deeper breath. "His vitals are stabilizing," the medic shouted. "He's coming back." Rex settled beside him, chest rising and falling in sync with Mark's, as if the dog's presence alone anchored his partner to the living world. For the first time that day, hope didn't feel impossible. It felt real. It felt alive, and it had four paws pressed against the stretcher, refusing to let go. The ambulance sped toward Riverside General, sirens slicing through the cold air. Inside, the atmosphere was a fragile mix of urgency and awe. Mark's breathing, once barely detectable, now came in uneven but determined pulls. His face twitched, eyelids fluttering, as though he were clawing his way up from a deep, suffocating dark. Rex lay wedged against the stretcher, refusing to move an inch. His eyes never left Mark's face. He listened. He studied every change in rhythm, every tremor, his instincts working harder than any machine in the ambulance. "His consciousness level is climbing," the medic said. "He's trying to come through." Elaine's hand shook as she touched Mark's shoulder. "Honey, it's okay. You're safe. You're safe." Mark's lips parted. The medics leaned closer. A raspy, fractured sound emerged, too soft to form words but unmistakably intentional. Rex responded instantly, nudging Mark's chest with gentle pressure, the same technique he used in training to stimulate breathing. Mark gasped, a painful, tearing breath. But it was deeper than the last. Then another, and another. Finally, his eyes cracked open, unfocused at first. The oxygen mask fogged with each shaky exhale. "Mark," Elaine whispered, "we're here. We've got you." His gaze wandered until it landed on Rex. A faint spark ignited in his eyes. He tried to lift his hand. Rex helped him by sliding his head underneath it. The medics exchanged looks. "He's responding cognitively. He's trying to communicate." Mark's throat bobbed as he forced breath into words. "Not accident." Elaine stiffened. "What? What do you mean?" Mark blinked slowly, fighting for coherence. "They tried to stop me." "Stop you from what?" Chief Daniels asked, leaning in. Mark's fingers curled weakly into Rex's fur, anchoring himself. "Evidence. Fentanyl ring. Not closed. Someone. Inside." The medics froze. Daniels went pale. "You're saying someone inside the department did this to you?" Daniels whispered. Mark nodded. "Just barely." Rex growled. A deep, rumbling sound, from somewhere low in his chest. He had smelled that truth long before any human realized it existed. Mark's breathing quickened. He wasn't done. "My locker. Flash drive." Rex knows the scent. And then his strength gave out. His eyes closed again, but his grip around Rex remained, faint but stubborn, refusing to release the one partner who had refused to give up on him. Daniels exhaled shakily. The funeral had become a rescue. The rescue had become a revelation. And now the truth was clawing its way into the light, thanks to a dog who could smell betrayal long before anyone else saw it. Riverside General Hospital felt nothing like the mourning chapel they had left behind. Instead of hushed grief, the hallways pulsed with controlled urgency. Nurses moved quickly, doctors called out orders, and officers stood clustered near the ICU doors, their faces tight with shock and anger. But Rex didn't care about any of that. He sat planted directly outside Mark Holloway's ICU room, his broad frame blocking half the doorway as if daring anyone to come through without permission. Every few seconds, his ears twitched toward the rhythmic beeping of the machines inside. His body never rested, not truly. Even lying down, he hovered in that half-alert state, unique to working dogs. "Has he moved?" Jenna asked softly, kneeling beside him. Rex didn't look at her. He kept his gaze fixed on the man lying in the room beyond the glass. Mark, pale but undeniably alive. An oxygen line in his nose, IV taped to his arm, chest rising and falling with steady, machine-guided determination. "He's stable," a passing nurse murmured. "It's a miracle he made it this far." Miracle. The word felt too small. Inside the room, Elaine Holloway sat at her husband's bedside, fingers woven through his. She had cried for so long her tears had dried to salt on her cheeks. She whispered to him, stories from their home, memories from their early years, promises that he wasn't alone. Not anymore. And every few minutes she glanced toward the door, where Rex kept vigil. "He won't leave that spot," Jenna said quietly. "He shouldn't," Elaine whispered back. "He saved him." Hours passed. Officers rotated in and out, stunned and silent. Some carried guilt, realizing they had doubted the dog they'd once praised. Others carried anger, understanding that their friend had been attacked by someone he trusted. Chief Daniels stood at the far end of the hallway, speaking with investigators sent by the state. His voice was low, clipped, heavy with betrayal. "We're pulling security footage, all personnel logs. Every case file Holloway touched before retirement," one investigator said. "And the flash drive?" Daniels asked. Jenna stepped forward. "I think Rex can find it." The investigator frowned. "How?" Jenna motioned to Rex. "Mark said he kept the drive in his locker. But he also said Rex knows the scent. If Mark handled the drive the night he collapsed, the residue on his clothes might match." Rex's ears twitched at his name. Daniels lowered his voice. "We're trusting a dog to lead an internal investigation." "Not just a dog," Jenna said. "His partner." The chief looked at Rex, really looked at him. At the dog who had shattered a funeral, risked discipline, and drawn the entire department back from a mistake they would never have forgiven themselves for. "No," Daniels said finally. "We're trusting the only one who knew the truth from the beginning." Just then, a soft sound echoed from the ICU room. Elaine gasped. "Mark!" Rex shot upright. His claws clicked against the tile as he pressed toward the door. Inside, Mark's eyes fluttered open, this time with more clarity. He turned his head, slow but intentional, toward the doorway. And when he saw Rex, something inside him shifted. A faint smile, barely there, pulled at the corner of his mouth. Rex let out a soft, broken whine. He nudged the door with his nose, tail trembling behind him. Mark's voice, rough and barely audible, cracked through the room. "Good boy." Elaine burst into tears again. Jenna covered her mouth. Even Daniels bowed his head, because in that fragile whisper, in that tiny sliver of returned strength, one truth became undeniable. Mark had come back, because his dog refused to let him go. 2 weeks later, the winter sun rose gently over Riverside, painting the rooftops in soft gold. Life in the town had begun to settle again, though the memory of the funeral that wasn't. A story whispered in diners, in barbershops, in grocery store aisles, lingered like a shared dream people still struggled to understand. At Riverside General, Mark Holloway sat upright in his hospital bed, thinner than before, scars still faint on his arms, but alive, fully, unmistakably alive. Doctors said his recovery was medically improbable. Nurses called it the Miracle Man case. But Mark simply called it Rex. The dog lay curled on the floor by his feet, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed in that vigilant, half sleep only working dogs seemed to master. Whenever Mark shifted, Rex lifted his head instantly. Whenever Mark coughed, Rex sat up fully, tail thumping nervously, until he was sure everything was fine. Elaine sat by the window, sunlight catching the lines of worry that had begun to soften again. She watched her husband stroke Rex's fur with slow, grateful movements. "You know he hasn't slept longer than a few minutes since they brought you here," she said softly. Mark smiled weakly. "He never did know how to rest if I couldn't." Their quiet moment was interrupted by a gentle knock. Chief Daniels stepped inside, holding a folder thick with paperwork. His uniform looked sharper than usual, but his face carried the shadow of weeks without proper sleep. "How are you feeling, Sergeant?" he asked, calling Mark by his former rank, a gesture of respect. "Better than dead," Mark whispered, earning a soft chuckle from Elaine. Daniels placed the folder on the tray. "The investigation is done. We found the flash drive in your old locker, exactly where you said it would be." He hesitated. "You were right, Mark. You weren't imagining things. Someone inside the department had been feeding information to the fentanyl ring you were tracking." Mark's jaw tightened, not from surprise, but from painful confirmation. "Rex knew before any of us," Daniels added quietly. Rex lifted his head at the sound of his name. The chief crouched down and rubbed Rex's neck, a rare gesture from a man normally reserved with displays of affection. "You saved him, boy. You saved all of us from burying the truth." A few days later, the department held a small ceremony. Nothing grand, nothing public, just officers gathering in a circle outside the station. Mark attended in a wheelchair, with Rex glued to his side like a living shadow. Daniels stood at the center with a black velvet box. "In all my years," he said, voice thick, "I've never seen loyalty like this. I've never seen instinct fight so hard against silence. And I've never seen a partner refuse to let death take someone who wasn't done living." He opened the box. Inside was a silver medal engraved with a single word: Valor. Rex didn't understand the medal, or the applause, or the tears, but he understood the hands that touched him, the gratitude in their voices, and the steady heartbeat of the man beside him. Mark leaned forward, resting his forehead gently against Rex's. "Thank you," he whispered, "for not giving up on me." As the sun dipped behind the mountains that evening, the town of Riverside embraced a new story, one not about tragedy or loss, but about a bond that refused to break, a bond that smelled danger before humans sensed it, that barked truth into a room full of doubt, that cracked open a coffin and pulled a man back toward life. And from that day forward, whenever anyone in Riverside spoke of miracles, they didn't look toward the sky. They looked toward a German shepherd whose loyalty had stopped a funeral and restarted a heartbeat. In the end, it wasn't a miracle the town expected. It wasn't thunder from the heavens or some impossible twist of fate. It was simply a dog, a loyal partner, who refused to believe his friend's story was over. Rex didn't speak a word, but his instincts shouted the truth louder than any voice in that chapel. He didn't understand betrayal, corruption, or conspiracy, but he understood a heartbeat. He understood the scent of danger, and he understood love, pure, unwavering, stubborn love. Because sometimes heroes don't arrive wearing medals or standing in uniform. Sometimes heroes walk on four paws, and sometimes the bravest act in the world is refusing to let someone you love slip away. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because every paw print has a story, and every story reminds us that courage comes in all shapes, all sizes, and sometimes with fur and a heartbeat.